golf bags in here who fit in easily. If you need even more space for your surfboards or bikes, you can take even whole seats out.
Now that's volume at 14. Let's get some volume.
Alright, so setting off here in the 2023 Integra. So the first thing you notice about this, well, you have a really nice low seat here. It's on the same platform as the G70, which I love dearly as far as its handling dynamics and just the sheer value you get with the G70. And so, yeah, I'm excited to try this out here. But as far as the usual stuff here with the GV70, visibility, very good. You have a very good view forward, nice thin A-pillars, mirrors off onto the doors, nice little window there at the A-pillar. So very easy to see forward. View out of the back is also actually really good, even though there's a little more of a slope to that rear hatch. Just a nice large rear window there. Another thing I really have been impressed by is just the smoothness of the ride. So the GV70s here, at least in these higher trims, have this road preview adaptive suspension. So it'll actually use the cameras that it uses for the adaptive cruise control and stuff to scan the road for imperfections and preload the suspension to perfectly soak up those bumps. Now, obviously, it has limitations. It's not like you're in a magic carpet ride here or anything, but it means that, you know, it's just going to give you a very smooth ride, and that combined with just the insanely quiet ride this has too. I mean, I just was in an Audi Q5 not too long ago, and that was also very nice, but this is definitely markedly more quiet in my opinion. So part of it comes down to these double paned windows, both in the front and on the higher trims here. You even have it on the back windows. And then just everything, they must have put so much sound deadening in this vehicle, and that might be part of why this is a little bit heavier than most of its competitors. Honestly though, I will have to wait till we get onto a back road, but I think that it's worth it just for the amount of isolation you get here in this cabin. It is almost uncanny how quiet it is when you're driving around, especially for this segment of vehicle, especially with the average, you know, Mercedes GLCs and stuff like that. Still having a fair amount of road noise and wind noise and stuff. This is, I think, actually a good bit better than all the competitors as far as quietness goes. It's also very responsive to all your commands. So you have an 8-speed automatic transmission, and even just dipping into the gas a little bit immediately gives you a downshift, and throttle response is immediate, even though this motor is turbocharged. It's twin turboed, and it's a big old V6 still too, so I mean, it's immediately going to give you some punch the second you call upon it. Brakes also really start to bite right at the top of the pedal there. I mean, you just barely touch the brake and it starts to brake, but it's not so abrupt that it's hard to be smooth with. It nicely ramps up, so that let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. All right. Picks up very nicely. It's a good amount of punch. It might not give you as much of a wow factor as you get from the competitors, some of which might be a little bit quicker, but this is still very punchy, so yeah, it's just a very meaty power band. Anyway, so this runs the 3.5 liter twin turbocharged V6 like other Genesis models. It does 375 horsepower, 391 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 is quoted by Genesis supposedly around 5.1 seconds is the number I saw. Some have suggested it could be closer to like 4.9 seconds, something like that. Regardless, you know, that is pretty quick, but I think like an X3 M40i will do it in about 4.5 seconds. So it might not be the fastest in a straight line in a drag race, but plenty of punch. I mean, you just ride this wave of torque that just pushes you forward in a mighty manner, and it is impressive feeling. I think it still feels very, very punchy, and there is also a launch control. Hopefully we'll see if we can try it out later, but there is a launch control you can do in Sport Plus mode, and so, you know, that'll give you a little bit of a more impressive launch if you want. It also seems to ramp up the engine noise a little bit in that Sport Plus, but I also noticed the idle actually got higher, so I think it jumps up a couple hundred RPMs there when you're in Sport Plus mode, so it even gets those turbos a little bit more ready to go too. But we're on this road that often generates a lot of road noise. that's all you hear. It's a very subdued hum. Again, very impressive, especially considering we're on 21-inch wheels too, with little rubber band tires that really can't absorb much. And so very impressive with all of that. But anyway, we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how this thing handles. Again, G70 platform, high expectations. Let's see how we do. Okay. Wow, the seatbelt grabbed me and I had a little bit of squealing from those tires. But it's hanging on to gears here for me too, because it's, you know, notice I'm in that Sport Plus mode, and I mean business. And so, interesting. Okay, so the tires are giving up a little bit, but it works with it. So part of the reason is these tires are not super sporty. They're only Michelin Sport Touring all-season tires. They're not Michelin Pilot Sport all-season tires, or even Michelin Pilot Sport 4s or something like that. Unfortunately, there's no way to get any kind of sportier tire on these. I think, you know, that is one way that, you know, some of the competitors might be a little bit sportier. Yeah, tires are what are letting this vehicle down. So on the G70, you can actually get this Pilot Sport 4s for that better grip with the rear-wheel drive version. But since this is all-wheel drive only, I guess they assume everyone wants the all-seasons. But I'd still like to see the Pilot all-season at least, instead of these Primacy Tour all-seasons. So that is the only thing letting this vehicle down. Aside from that, it feels really good. Now, you have very heavy steering. I've noticed that not only in Sport Plus mode, but even in Comfort mode. Steering is pretty heavy, and so that also kind of hinders how much the vehicle feels like it wants to dive into corners, just because I have to put more muscle into turning the wheel to actually crank it to get it to go. I wish the steering was a little bit lighter, but it still felt really good. And also in this very top Sport Prestige trim only, you get a torque vectoring rear diff that can send up to 100% of the power to one of those rear wheels to help power you out of a corner. And I'm not sure why it's only on the Prestige trim and not on the other versions of 3.5T Sports, especially the Sport ones you would think would have that. But anyway, so I think I felt that working a little bit there, and so I think that helps to maximize the somewhat meager grip you do have from these tires. It's also a fairly heavy vehicle. These weigh 4,453 pounds here in this trim with this engine and all of that. And that, depending on your competitor, that is heavier no matter what. It's about 50 or so pounds heavier than a BMW X3 M40i. And then whenever you go to stuff like an Audi SQ5 and a Mercedes GLC 43, those actually are between like 200 and 250 pounds lighter. I will say I've actually driven all three of those competitors. It was a few years ago, but I have driven all of them, and I would say that probably all of them do feel a little bit lighter than this. This is definitely the heaviest of the bunch. Again, the steering doesn't help with that weighty feeling, but I think just the fact that it was a little less willing to dive in as those vehicles were is the only thing. But I honestly think if they even just put the Pilot all seasons on here, it would be so much better with the handling. I mean, it's not bad, at least on this, you know, sportiest version. Again, if you're gonna go up to a limited slip diff and all this kind of stuff, you should upgrade tires too. That's like a major thing. Is the first thing you should upgrade is the tires if you're trying to do any kind of sportier driving. And so I'm not sure why Genesis overlooked the tires here on this, but aside from that, it handles itself very well.
Maybe an upstart luxury brand, but the company is killing it with a bunch of their new products. I mean, of course, it started basically with the G70, then the G90 came out, the GV80 SUV was their first SUV, loved that vehicle, and the redesigned G80. So now that I've driven also basically every model except this one, my bar is set pretty high. My standards are set pretty high. My expectations are high because Genesis has been delivering on those expectations ever since this brand came out back in 2016. And first impressions are strong. This SUV has a nimbleness, has a luxury feel that basically makes you feel like you're piloting a vehicle that's not, I wouldn't say twice the price, but at the price that this car is, it's probably, it feels like it's worth like another 20 grand. And this is the top of the line Sport Prestige with the twin turbo V6. So first thing I want to do, and going slightly uphill, I just got 0 to 60 in 5.26 seconds. Remember, this is the top twin turbo V6 with 375 horsepower and 391 pound-feet of torque, and a vehicle that weighs about 500 pounds less than the GV80 that it's based on, or that it's not based on, that it's smaller. Remember, this is a smaller vehicle, but 5.2 is an excellent time to get for a vehicle like this. So I'm very, very impressed with the performance, but I think I could actually do faster because we were going slightly uphill there. Now, because this is based off of the G70, you feel a certain level of sportiness. This vehicle comes standard with the company's all-wheel drive, but it's a rear-biased all-wheel drive system, so it's going to add or it's going to try to send more power to the rear to give it more of those tail-out shenanigans that we like, you know, in a performance SUV like this. It feels very much akin to the last Audi SQ5 that I drove, although it doesn't quite have the sound. It definitely has the pull in the acceleration. And it has the power. This has more horsepower and torque than the Audi, which is nice. And it's also less expensive. But hey, I want to try another one. Let's go ahead and see on a straighter road here. And there I got 4.9 seconds, 4.89 seconds, and I'll take that time. That is a quick SUV, and it's quicker than the last Audi SQ5 that I drove, the Sportback, which did it in around 5.1 seconds. So this is definitely a quick SUV. It doesn't quite have the sound from the exhaust system. I wish the Genesis would do a louder exhaust, but I can't argue with the fact that this has very, very impressive performance for a non-N version of this vehicle. And literally, you can get the back end to step out like that because this vehicle is rear drive biased. It will let the tail step out, and you can feel that it's a rear drive chassis. Unlike the Audi SQ5, I'm going to keep comparing it to that. This feels a little bit more tail out happy, or tail happy, because of that rear drive chassis. The steering also offers a lot of feedback. It's pretty heavy in this Sport Plus mode. The transmission, this is the 8-speed automatic that is a Genesis designed transmission. Does a really great job of holding gears. It comes with these paddles as well, which do a pretty good job of blipping the throttle. Although the upshifts could be a little faster. I pulled the paddle and it took a second for it to respond. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the nannies back on because we definitely don't want it to be with it off, but I'll put it back into Sport Plus, which puts the stability control into like a less restrictive setting. It lets you have a little bit more fun. But when you're just kind of cruising along, the ride quality for me is still good. I mean, this one has the 21-inch wheels. I've seen some people complain that the ride is too harsh. They said the same thing about the GV80. And while I guess on some broken pavement, I could see it being a little bit more bumpy, but on this kind of pavement, it feels like I'm gliding on a cloud, honestly. The suspension is, to be honest, a little bit softer than I expected it to be. The BMW X3 M40i feels a little bit more stiff than this. The BMW also feels slightly more quicker because BMW tends to underrate their straight sixes. This has a much better ride quality, however, than the Mercedes AMG GLC 43 and the BMW. This is akin to the Audi's ride quality, but it has way more performance. It just feels like it slots a nice middle ground between the accelerative performance of the BMW and the Audi, or the Mercedes, but the comfortness of the Audi. Really great performance. Oh, love the quickness of this SUV. I mean, yes, they do offer it with a 4-cylinder turbo, and that's probably all the engine you need. I haven't had a chance to drive it in this vehicle yet, but that one weighs around 200 pounds less than the V6. But it's got seats that also hug you a little bit more. This is the Sport Prestige version, so it's for an extra $5,000, you have these additional bolstering in the seats. It actually tugs at you a little bit more when you have it in sport mode, and then when you switch it out of sport mode, it actually will release you a little bit. You can feel that as I go into the comfort drive mode here. Definitely want to use the launch control. Still fast though. Ooh. I am super impressed. This beats all the other German SUVs that I've driven. Obviously, there's a new Lexus NX that's coming out. I'll be driving that next month, but it's still a front drive platform. This is probably one of the most well-rounded in the luxury space that I've driven. It also doesn't make you sacrifice, you know, the thing about this car is you don't feel like you're sacrificing a lot. You don't feel like you're sacrificing interior space, you're not sacrificing handling, you're not sacrificing comfort, you're definitely not sacrificing luxury. It just feels like the only thing you might be sacrificing is the name. Yes, Genesis doesn't have the same, you know, cachet as a Porsche, as an Audi, as a BMW, as a Mercedes, but you can look past that name, and this car actually attracts a lot of attention. Just having it for the last couple of days, I noticed everybody was looking at this car, especially in this beautiful, beautiful bright red exterior with this dark navy blue interior. I didn't think I would like a red and blue combination, but I like it in this car, that's for sure. Actually, it still tripped the tires there a little bit. It just feels so good. And when you do want to use the driver assistance tech, it's got their highway driving assist 2, it's got full speed range adaptive cruise, it's got lane keep assist. It all works really well. It's among the best in the industry. The only thing it doesn't do is it doesn't do automatic lane changing for you like Mercedes would, and it doesn't have a true like hands-free operation on the highway. I assume Genesis may be working on that.
Still pretty quick. Yeah, it didn't give me any notification that launch control is active, so maybe I did something wrong. But with a brake torque launch, it's still punchy, but I can kind of tell this engine feels like it's more tuned to being a luxury engine than it is a performance, powerhouse or anything like that. I mean, it's certainly, again, plenty punchy. It matches all the competitors on specs and stuff. Sometimes even actually exceeds some of the competitors with specs, but yeah, I mean, it rips really well. It just doesn't feel quite as eager. Again, maybe that's the weight holding it back a little bit. I also think it might just be the tuning. This 8-speed automatic too does a really good job, but I feel like maybe the gears are a little too widely spaced out or something, so that it's there's long strides to each gear before it really does start to rip. I'd like to see maybe some shorter gearing to maybe give you a little bit of a more intense experience here. Again, maybe only in the Sport Prestige trim with the LSD or something. Also, there's no dedicated manual mode, but you can play with the paddle shifters here to put it and force it into a manual mode here. So try that out. A little bit delayed. Downshifts are decent. I mean, if you're familiar with any other Hyundai, Kia, or Genesis product with this 8-speed automatic that they build in-house, it's the same thing. It's the same kind of shift speeds you get in a Stinger, G70, anything like that. They're all pretty much the same. I mean, it's a fine shifting automatic. It's just not as good as the ZF 8-speed. But, it's better than your average run-of-the-mill automatic as well. So I think it's pretty good. I honestly don't have to say it. Like, even in a regular Audi Q5 with the DSG, that has snappier manual shifts. Again, I don't know how many people are doing manual shifting in a GV70, but just wanted to mention, since this is the sportiest version, if you are someone who wants to use those, just keep in mind that probably won't be quite as responsive as you might be wanting, but they work, especially if you just want to do a couple little shifts here and there. It should be totally fine. Oh man, this thing's actually a little bit tail happy. It almost like it definitely has a rear bias setup to it. And you actually get a little bit of a turbo hiss too. It's not any kind of wastegate sound or anything, but you get you can actually hear the exhaust a little bit here in this. Now that is another area though where this does fall behind some of the competitors. The GLC 43 and the X3 M40i in particular sound fantastic. They crackle and pop and bang and do all the fun things. And this doesn't do any of that. So that is one area where I wish they did, a little bit of work there. I'm not sure if it has an active exhaust. I know that's something we added to the G70 for 2022. But even the active exhaust in that was underwhelming. Again, they know how to do awesome exhaust. They do it in the Veloster end, the Elantra end, all those end products have those crackles and pops from the exhaust. I get it, this is luxurious and stuff, but that has to stop BMW and Mercedes from still having those insane exhausts. So maybe they're wanting to go a little classier with this, I don't know. But I personally would say, again, if you're going for the Sport Prestige and you want the absolute craziest performance with the LSD and stuff, give everyone the crazy exhaust too, and maybe reserve for that trim or something, or do some other hardcore version down the road or something like that. But it does turn in nicely though. It's just, again, those tires immediately start to protest. If you had good grip on this thing, I think it would be a lot more dynamic and, it'd be even more rewarding to push in corners. Because I don't think really the weight holds it back a whole lot. It's just, again, lighten up the steering a little bit, put better tires on it, and this thing, I think it would do wonders for the handling of this thing. But as it is already, like I said, very, very good handling. And now we're back in comfort mode, just cruising behind traffic here. And this road does have a decent amount of potholes, so I wanted to try this road preview thing. I'm actually deliberately hitting the potholes. And I mean, it soaks them up very well. Again, 21-inch wheels with little rubber band tires. There's only so much you can do, but honestly, this is a very smooth ride. I mean, it's very, very well done with that adaptive suspension. I will say, yeah, it might feel a little softer here in comfort mode, but this adaptive suspension Genesis has doesn't do any kind of wild differences. I commented on the same thing in the G70 without adaptive suspension, where, yeah, it's softer here in comfort, and it is a little bit firmer here in Sport Plus mode. I'll even, just for kicks, I'll go back up into Sport Plus mode and hit some potholes. you do feel that they come through the cabin a little bit more. You get that immediate stiffness there, but it's not unrefined in either mode. So you can daily drive this thing in Sport Plus, and I think honestly you'd still have a smoother ride than what you get in the GLC 43. That thing almost felt like it wanted to knock my fillings out of my teeth with how stiff the ride can be sometimes in that GLC 43. This is a lot more polished and smooth. So, you know, I think the consensus I'm kind of coming to so far initially here with the GV70 is that this is kind of a little bit of a happy medium. It gives you all the power and a lot of the performance of, you know, those German rivals with their performance variants, but I think it actually gives you a little bit of a smoother ride than most of those, a little bit more polished, like I said, more sound deadening than all of those, and also the transmission's, I think, smoother. So, you know, if you want those snappy shifts, go for it. And I think the BMW does a really good job of straddling both smoothness and the snappiness, but the GLC 43 actually had really rough shifts sometimes, especially in manual mode was very rough, and I think it kind of gets more close to this in its feel. I'd say this actually feels a little bit sharper because the SQ5 that I reviewed actually had a decent throttle delay that I didn't love, and just felt maybe a little more relaxed than I would like. So this might be more in line with that. I have to drive a newer SQ5 to compare it, because the last one I did, I believe, was like a 2018 model. But you know, now we're just merging onto the highway here, and it's just effortless, you know, buttery smooth power here. Another thing I really like about merging onto the highway here is that you have this blind view monitor, which is something, but we'll go ahead and put on the highway drive assist. This has highway drive assist 2.0.